Welcome back to another episode of South Florida Business. I'm your host, Paul Barron, and of course, we are breaking down some of the topics that are really affecting the business and not only the business scene, but the entire economy nationwide. And we're doing it today with an expert, Ami Kassar, who is with MultiFunding out of Philadelphia. Great to have you on today's show, Ami.
All good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so Ami, let's go into really kind of the PPP and the SBA funding programs that are available for businesses and small businesses out there, and kind of get a breakdown of what I got a chance to sit on one of your webinars, very informative. Let's kind of, for our viewers, break down the PPP first as its state of today. And just so everybody's aware, from release of this video, there's a lot of things that are always changing, so make sure and check the most recent news from the SBA site. But I want to hear a little bit about what the current state is of the PPP program, Ami.
Sure. So the PPP is really a program, and you have to understand the intent of it. The intent of it is to allow employers to get their employees back on payrolls if they haven't already laid them off or put them in furlough, and to pay them for 8 weeks. And to keep their full payroll and the benefits, and all that amount, should they actually do that with their money, will be forgiven. So the hope is that even if employees are sitting at home, they can still, pay their bills because they're getting their full paycheck and their benefits, have their health insurance, and that, knock on wood, when the economy hopefully is ready to open in time, everyone will be ready to get back to normal.
On that program, Ami, with the PPP funding, obviously we're now about a week and a few days since the announcement of the PPP availability. It's taking some time for many companies to get this. I think the last number I heard was around $75 billion had been funded so far. So my question to you is, if you are now, it's mid-April, if it takes you another 10 days into late April, does that 8-week period start from the date of your funding documentation that you get, or from the original PPP availability?
8 weeks starts from the minute you get the day the money hits your bank account. So I think it's helpful for your viewers to understand the process. First of all, you have to get your information together, which is your application, and calculate 2.5 months time of your payroll last year. And there are a couple different nuances to that and calculations. Then once you've done that, you have to find a participating bank or lender who's willing to take your application. Typically, the banks are much more interested in lending to existing customers, and or in some communities, there are community banks that are willing to do it, but often want a checking account in exchange for it. Then the bank has to process your application and submit it to the SBA for an approval number. And that can take some days or days. Once the SBA gets you your approval number, information goes back to the bank, who has got to provide you with closing documents and get you your money. So the funding here does not start at the government. It starts at your bank or local community credit union, or in some cases, fintech companies that are now up and participating in the program.
Yeah, I saw a Lendio, Fundbox, a few others that had started to transact, or at least start the process of getting. One thing that
let's just talk about that for a second.
Sure.
You're going to an online source, whoever it is. I strongly recommend you check them out carefully and make sure that they actually are doing or able to do what they say they're doing. I'm not saying one specific isn't, but there is undoubtedly a lot of data mining and data grabbing going on out there.
Yep.
So what I like to say is, unless you research that online source is either an approved lender or has partnered up specifically with and can document that they've partnered up with an approved SBA lender to help fund their loans, be very, very careful about who you give your information to, because there are an awful lot of scams out there.
Yeah, for sure. Great tip there. I want to get into the detail of the documents that are required to implement the PPP transaction loan. For those that are putting together their payroll, so whether they're using their quarterly 941s or they're using their monthly payroll ledgers to be able to evaluate what is included in this. Does this include both base payroll as well as the payroll taxes to be calculated at the 2.5 times rate?
Yeah. It includes base payroll, includes employer taxes, includes state and local taxes that are paid. It includes health benefits, retirement benefits, sick leave, etc. There is a cap of up to, for the base pay, of up to $100,000 per individual. So if somebody earns, as an example, $300,000, then you need to take them down to 2.5 months of $100,000 and then add their benefits on top.
Yeah. I see. Okay. All right. And what about because many of the small businesses here in South Florida are either owner operated. So in most cases, that owner may not necessarily be on the payroll, but is in the payroll system just as, an untaxed individual. How would that work with an owner operator in South Florida?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's one area where the rules and the guidance is less clear about exactly how it works for owner operators or partners, or based on their draws, or etc. So, and each bank is therefore going to interpret it a little bit differently. So, my advice is put it all in there, and obviously not more than you've taken out. But it's my belief that an owner should be qualified, and then see what your bank says. Be very careful though that, say you put in an application to a bank for $300,000, I'm making up that number, and they come back and say they're willing to approve you for 270 or 280, that's okay. But some cases banks are offering to approve people for a dramatically lower amount than they believe they're eligible for. And then in that case, usually something's wrong, and try to be assured that your bank or participating lender is not going to submit you to the SBA for approval until such time as they have your blessing on what number they're going to submit for you. Because once you have an approval from the SBA, you're done. There's no appeal process or anything like that.
Interesting. That's a good point. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the things that, at least I've talked to many business leaders here in our home state, Florida, and they've already gone through this process, and they've actually received information back from their banks, and this has been both with big banks and also small banks. And curious, because this may, for those who have not filed for the PPP, this may get into some of the details of what they need to prepare for. And that is that the banks, which had to really rush to get the system up, in many cases were not capable of actually collecting the documents. But the one that was most intriguing to me was the fact that they're requiring electronic signature certifications on the PDF, essentially the loan document. And in many cases, it wasn't enabled in many of these bank systems. Would you recommend going through the bank system or doing the application on your own through your own Adobe with your electronic signature attached?
So I really think that's bank specific, and every bank has built and is in the process of building their own systems to deal with this stuff. And again, possession is 9/10 of the law. So, and there's very little that's perfect about all this. So if that's what your bank is asking for, as long as you're clear, you're working with a authorized bank or lender or FDIC insured bank, has a reputation to uphold, it shouldn't be a problem.
Very cool. So let's talk, all right, so this is good stuff. Let's move on to the forgiveness side. And so the scenario is pretty straightforward, as I understand it. 75% is allocated toward some sort of funding for the employees and or extended employment of your workers. Once that's satisfied, the other 25%, rent, utilities, scenarios like that, at that point, what do you feel is going to be the way that the SBA is actually interacting with companies once this is over to be able to forgive that loan?
So the forgiveness is one of the areas that is actually most vague right now. And there's a lot of questions exactly about how that process is going to work. The way it is intended to work is that you will go back to the lender where you submitted the application with the required documentation to prove what your forgiveness request is. The lender will then process that and you'll have to certify that the information you're providing is correct. That's onus is on the borrower, not the lender, to do that. And the lender will have 60 days to process that and issue you.
Interesting. Let's move off of the PPP program for a moment and go into the EIDL, and that is the more extended disaster relief funding that's happening. And of course, one component, another one that I thought was a little confusing in both my research and also in data and research that we found coming from the SBA, and that is the $10,000 bridge grant, so to speak. Now they've started to clarify more about what that $10,000 bridge grant is capable of and how eligible you might or might not be for it. Can you explain how the bridge grant works?
So the EIDL has become a little bit, if you get some money, I'm calling it like the lottery now. I don't expect many people to actually see money from the EIDL.
Okay.
So by comparison, in the initial allocations from Congress, $349 billion was allocated to the PPP program and $10 billion was allocated to the EIDL program. And so most of the money is focused was originally focused on the PPP. And the original idea was they said, well, you can get a $10,000 grant deposited into your bank account within 3 days to give you some immediate relief. Well, that's a great idea, but 4 million people caught wind on it and applied really quickly. Mm-hmm. And there's some applications there in that program right now to the tune of, I've heard, of $380 billion, and only $10 billion is allocated. So one of the things they did to ration it is they dropped the amount, instead of a $10,000 grant, to up to $1,000 per employee. Mm-hmm. We are waiting to see. I've only heard of one person actually getting an EIDL grant in their bank account, and they were applicant number 23,999 to apply.
Wow. Okay.
Now, keep in mind that the EIDL is administrated and run by the government, and there was, and I mean, they're trying to build it up, absolutely no infrastructure to run a program like this. The biggest thing they ever did was Katrina, and that took them something like 5 months to get the money out. And so it is a real mess, and I don't think anyone should count, barring some miracle, on EIDL money hitting their bank account anytime.
Interesting. Well, that's a good note, and one that I think a lot of business owners, because that's the other scenario here that is occurring, is business owners are kind of left in the lurch a bit on trying to hold off on certain access of retaining workers, and in the idea that the PPP program and or the EIDL program is going to come through. And it sounds like it's going to take some time to get all of this administered, especially at the rate of which the PPP is being deployed. Still a very small fraction of that fund is enabled. And it's likely that we're going to probably see some additional programs come through Congress in the coming months to try to go.
I would say to folks, this is just the first inning, and we're not, and there's a lot of learning going on. A lot of people on one side really frustrated and angry, and I get it. And on the other side, I mean, there are tens of thousands of people right now who've been working 24/7 in banks across the country, trying to get through all this. And I know the SBA is trying to hire up. And if you believe everyone's hearts and minds, at least in the banking community, are in the right places, and I do, there's just a Herculean effort going on. As of Monday today, when we're recording this, the SBA had funded or allocated just over 1 million PPP numbers in a matter of 10 days. And if you just put that in context, last year, the whole system over a year did 60,000, and then they did 1 million over 10 days. That
Wow.
is a small miracle.
Yeah, that is a small miracle. Even though we are dealing with active businesses, 30 million of those, we're probably going to see maybe 50% of that actually affected with PPP funding. So that'd be interesting to kind of see how the movement is going forward. Let's talk also about beyond the SBA, because now you have businesses who have viable businesses. Sure, they've been hit economically, but the likelihood is they're going to be able to come out of this, pivot, do whatever it is that's going to be able to get their business back on track and a slow move back to profitability. What is your recommendation when you look at those kinds of businesses to start to look at securing new kinds of funding deals? What's on the table out there? What are you seeing in the market?
And most of private lending to small businesses is just dead right now, as people try to just reverberate from the shock and figure out what's safe and what's next. We do have a handful of SBA lenders who are open for regular SBA lending. And if you do have a business that is expected to do well from this, and there are not too many of them, but they do exist, we have lenders who will actually give you a conventional SBA loan now. And if you do take one of those, the beauty of it is that 6 months of your principal and interest are forgiven right up front. So I would encourage anyone who's thinking about growth and expansion or dealing with sudden crazy growth as a result of the COVID-19 crisis to certainly think about a regular SBA loan. And if they want help, we'd be happy to talk.
Interesting. Okay, very good. Kassar, great information on this. I think as we continue to monitor a very changing environment of what we're dealing with today on how the federal funding is going to start affecting business on a day in, day out basis, we'll definitely keep you on a short communication tether there to hopefully get some new input as things continue to revolve. But thanks for stopping in on the show today.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there. Take care now.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks again for everyone catching us here on South Florida Business. You will be able to catch this podcast and more on both iTunes, Spotify, as well as syndication on RealView Network and also Foodable Network as we continue to get this show out in more places to get it out there for more business owners to help you with running and operating your business right here in the South Florida economic condition of the coronavirus. Stay tuned right here for more great news and topics from South Florida Business. We'll catch you soon.